My life felt like it was finally falling into place. Like every piece I had ever dreamed of was settling exactly where it belonged. The long nights of doubt, the breakups, the waiting, all of it seemed to make sense the moment Adam proposed. He wasn't just the man I loved. He was the man who made love feel effortless. The way he looked at me, steady, warm, certain, made me believe that maybe, after everything, I'd finally been chosen for something pure. From the start, my sister Chloe was part of every plan, every decision, every dress fitting. We'd always been inseparable, not just by blood, but by a bond that had survived childhood fights, teenage jealousy, and all the secrets only sisters know. She was older by 2 years, wiser in some ways, sharper in others, and she carried herself with that quiet confidence that could light up or shadow a room depending on how she felt that day. When I told her Adam had proposed, she screamed louder than I did. She hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would break and told me, "Finally, the universe gave you what you deserve." I remember that moment vividly, the sunlight on her hair, the excitement in her eyes. There was nothing false about it. Or at least, that's what I believed. Chloe immediately offered to help plan the wedding. She says she wanted to take the pressure off me so I could just enjoy being engaged. She handled everything, the caterers, the photographer, even the music playlist for the reception. Adam laughed and called her the second bride. And we all laughed with him. I thought it was adorable how well they got along. Looking back, that laughter feels like a cruel echo. Our parents were over the moon. My mother kept saying how proud she was to see her two daughters working together so beautifully. And my father, quiet as always, would just smile and pat Adam on the back, saying, "You're joining a family of strong women, son." He had no idea how right he was, but not in the way he meant. The wedding was set for late spring, a small ceremony at an old vineyard estate just outside Charleston. The place was perfect. White stone arches covered in ivy, rose gardens that perfumed the air, and a reception hall that looked like something out of a painting. It was everything I'd ever dreamed of, and Chloe was the one who found it. She called me one evening, her voice breathless with excitement. "You have to see this place, Elle," she said. "It's you. It's your story." And when I saw it, she was right. It felt like home. In the months that followed, Chloe and I became even closer. We spent hours choosing color palettes, tasting cakes, arranging flower samples across my living room floor. Adam would stop by after work, teasing us for being so obsessed with table linens and seating charts. He'd bring wine, and we'd laugh until midnight. It felt like the three of us were building something together, something beautiful and lasting. I never imagined that same trio would destroy everything I knew about love, loyalty, and blood. One afternoon, I came home early from a dress fitting and found Chloe in the kitchen with Adam. They were laughing, the kind of easy laughter that comes when two people are genuinely comfortable with each other. She had flour on her cheek, and he was wiping it off with a napkin. It was innocent. Completely innocent. Or at least, that's what I told myself when my stomach tightened for a reason I couldn't explain. I brushed it off. Of course, my fiancé and my sister would get along. They were planning the biggest day of my life for me. How ungrateful would I be to feel jealous? So I smiled, joined them, and let the moment fade into memory. Weeks passed, and the wedding drew closer. Chloe insisted we spend the final weekend at the estate to finalize details. She said she wanted it to be perfect, that nothing should go wrong on my big day. Her energy was contagious. She managed every supplier call, every guest update, every late night run to check decorations. She was unstoppable, and I loved her for it. I kept telling people, I couldn't do this without Chloe. That sentence would haunt me later. The night before the wedding, everything felt like a dream. The estate glowed under strings of golden lights. Our families mingled on the patio, glasses of champagne in hand, soft music floating through the air. Adam was radiant, smiling, confident, everything a groom should be. And Chloe? She was the perfect maid of honor. She flitted between guests, laughing, hugging, making sure everything ran smoothly. Every time our eyes met, she smiled warmly, like she was proud of me, like she truly loved me. That night, she came into my room while I was staring at my dress hanging near the window, that perfect white gown I dreamed about since I was a teenager. She sat beside me, held my hand, and said softly, "You deserve everything good in this world, Elle. Don't ever let anyone make you doubt that." Her words felt like a blessing. If only I had known they were actually a goodbye. I didn't sleep much that night. Nerves, excitement, all of it blending into a restless storm. Around dawn, I heard faint footsteps outside my door, but I thought it was just staff preparing breakfast. I didn't think much of it. When the morning light flooded in, Chloe was the first to knock. She brought a tray with coffee, toast, and a small bouquet of roses. "Bride's breakfast," she said cheerfully. Her hair was tied up messily, and her eyes were bright. I remember thanking her and thinking how lucky I was to have her. A few hours later, my mother came in with tears in her eyes, fixing my veil and whispering, "You're the most beautiful bride I've ever seen." Everything felt surreal, the music starting outside, the hum of guests arriving, the sound of laughter echoing through the garden. Chloe came back one last time before I walked down the aisle. She adjusted my dress, tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, and whispered, "You ready to have the best day of your life?" I nodded, smiling, my heart full. She kissed my cheek and walked out before me, holding her bouquet. She didn't look back. If I had paid closer attention, I might have noticed her hands trembling. I might have seen the flicker of something, guilt, hesitation, dread, in her eyes. But I was too blinded by love, by the fantasy that everything was finally perfect. When I reached the end of that aisle and saw Adam waiting, handsome, calm, everything I ever wanted, I thought I was walking toward forever. But I was walking straight into a lie. That day, under the clear spring sky and the scent of blooming roses, I said, "I do," with all my heart. And standing right behind me, smiling for the cameras, my sister whispered under her breath. Words I didn't hear then. Words I would only learn later from someone else. She said, "He should have been mine." The ceremony ended in a blur of applause, camera flashes, and champagne. Everyone said it was perfect. The vows, the laughter, the way Adam looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. For a few hours, I believed it. But even then, something felt off. Small things. Barely noticeable. When I reached for Adam's hand during the reception, his fingers were cold. When we posed for photos, Chloe stood a little too close, her smile a little too wide. And when the band played our first dance, I caught her watching us with that unreadable expression she used to wear when we were kids, the one she wore whenever she wanted something I had. Still, I ignored it. I had to. Because if I stopped smiling for even a second, the truth might start to show through the cracks. Later that night, after the guests had left and the music faded, Adam carried me across the threshold of our honeymoon suite, the one Chloe had personally booked. There were candles on the table, rose petals on the bed, and a bottle of champagne chilling by the window. She'd even written a note in her perfect cursive. "To my favorite couple, may your forever be as beautiful as tonight." I remember smiling when I read it. Now I can barely stand to look at her handwriting. We toasted to forever. We kissed. And then, just as the world should have gone quiet and tender, he pulled away. He said he was exhausted. Too much champagne. Too much stress. Too much everything. I laughed, a little disappointed but understanding. The day had been long. I told him it didn't matter. We had the rest of our lives. But as I lay there alone in the dark, listening to the soft hum of the night outside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He wasn't beside me. His side of the bed was cold. I checked the bathroom, empty. The hallway, empty. Then I heard it. A laugh. Soft, familiar, muffled, but close. It came from down the hall, from the room Chloe was supposed to be staying in. At first, my mind refused to make sense of it. It couldn't. I told myself it was another guest, maybe one of Adam's friends. But then I heard it again. That laugh. Her laugh. And his voice. My heart stopped. For a moment, the world went completely still. I walked toward the sound, my bare feet silent on the carpet. Every step felt heavier than the last. When I reached the door, I froze. It was slightly open, just enough for a sliver of light to slice through the darkness. I could see shadows moving inside. I could hear whispers. Her voice. His voice. I should have opened the door. I should have walked in and let the truth shatter me cleanly, instead of letting it rot inside me for days. But I didn't. I stood there, trembling, breathless, and listened as everything I believed in died quietly on the other side of that wall. When the light finally went out, I turned and walked back to my room. My body moved, but my mind didn't. I climbed into bed, pulled the blanket up to my chin, and stared at the ceiling until morning. When Adam returned just before dawn, I pretended to be asleep. He smelled of soap and guilt. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "I love you." The words burned. I didn't respond. The next morning, Chloe acted like nothing happened. She laughed at breakfast, teased me about how tired I looked, and handed me a bouquet of leftover flowers from the ceremony. Her eyes sparkled like she was hiding something, and for the first time, I realized she was. We spent the next few days surrounded by family. I smiled through it all, the brunches, the photos, the toasts. Every glance between Adam and Chloe was like a needle to the skin, subtle but sharp. They didn't touch. They didn't speak much. But silence can be louder than sin. When everyone finally left and it was just the two of us, I asked him, calmly, carefully, "Did something happen between you and my sister?" He didn't answer right away. He looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "You're imagining things, Elle. She's your sister. Don't make this ugly." Then he smiled. That soft, careful smile men use when they know they're lying. I wanted to believe him. So I did, because believing him hurt less than losing both of them. But belief is fragile, and lies always leave fingerprints. 2 weeks later, Chloe stopped calling as often. She said she was giving us space. But Adam started coming home late, meetings, traffic, excuses that didn't sound like him. Then, one night, I found her bracelet under the passenger seat of his car. The same bracelet I had given her on my birthday. When I confronted him, he laughed. He said, "Are you serious? She probably left it there weeks ago. You're being paranoid." Paranoid. That word stuck in my throat like glass. Because somewhere deep down, I knew I wasn't paranoid. I was right, but I needed proof. Something undeniable. Something that would make the truth stop pretending to be a dream. So I did what I swore I'd never do. I followed him. And what I saw that night, the way he looked at her, the way she touched him, the way their laughter filled the same air that once belonged to me, it broke me clean in half. They didn't even look guilty. They looked happy. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, watching from the shadows, as the people I loved most became strangers right in front of me. When I finally walked away, my legs barely worked. My heart didn't, either. That night, I packed a bag and left without saying a word. Chloe called the next morning, of course she did. Her voice was soft, careful, rehearsed. "Elle, we need to talk." But I hung up before she could finish. Because some words don't deserve to be heard. And some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness. I used to believe heartbreak kills you. That it drains the air out of your lungs until there's nothing left. But I was wrong. Heartbreak doesn't kill you. It forges you. Slowly. Quietly. Into something colder, sharper, more dangerous than before. After that night, I stopped being the woman who begged for explanations. I became the woman who watched. Every silence, every glance, every trembling excuse, I kept it all. Julian and my sister, Claire, thought they had gotten away with it. That my silence meant surrender. That I'd retreat into pity while they played house in the same city where everyone knew my name. But grief can turn into fuel when you feed it enough rage. 3 weeks after the wedding that never was, I began to plan. Not out of hate, but precision. Because I wanted them to feel it. The slow, creeping realization that their fairy tale wasn't real. That every word, every comfort, every smile between them had been carefully poisoned by me. Claire had always been fragile beneath her charm. The kind of woman who needed admiration like oxygen. She lived for validation, compliments, glances, approval. Without it, she collapsed. And Julian? He was predictable, a man driven by control, but weak to praise. I knew exactly what strings to pull. It started small. An anonymous email to Julian's firm, screenshots of texts between Claire and another man. Carefully fabricated, realistic enough to raise suspicion but not proof. The seed was planted. Next came whispers. I knew the circles they moved in, the dinner parties, the charity galas, the fragile facades they wore to prove their new love was genuine. A single message here, a carefully timed photograph there. Claire's reputation began to bend under its own weight. People talk. Especially when the gossip tastes like sin. Then came the second layer, guilt. I sent Claire a letter. No signature. Just a single sentence written in my handwriting. "You took my future. Now I'm taking yours." I knew she'd recognize it. My sister always feared the unknown, shadows in closets, footsteps in the dark. Now, she started hearing them again. Julian dismissed her paranoia at first, of course. That's what narcissists do. They minimize everything that isn't about them. But soon, even he couldn't ignore the little things. The flowers left at their doorstep, the same ones from our wedding. The melody of our first dance playing faintly on the radio when he got into his car. I wasn't haunting them. I was reminding them. By the second month, the cracks were showing. Julian stopped posting their pictures online. Claire stopped attending her Pilates classes. They were unraveling in real time, both too proud to admit they were afraid. And I watched from the distance I'd built, calm and methodical. Every step was deliberate. Every gesture calculated. Because revenge isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the whisper that makes them question their sanity. But the real turning point came when I met someone who unknowingly became my accomplice, Daniel. He was a lawyer at Julian's firm, though he didn't know who I was at first. I made sure of that. I played the polite client, soft-spoken, a little broken, just enough for sympathy. He handled some estate matters for me, or so he thought. What he didn't realize was that through him, I gained access to confidential files, corporate transactions, and the one thing Julian valued most, his reputation. Julian's firm prided itself on loyalty and discretion. So imagine the panic when a few misplaced documents, traced conveniently to his personal email, surfaced anonymously at the ethics board. Not enough to destroy him. Just enough to bruise his perfect image. He was suspended temporarily. Claire panicked. She tried to help, but her desperation only made things worse. She began to suspect him of lying. He began to accuse her of sabotage. They stopped trusting each other, exactly as planned. One evening, I received a call, unknown number. When I answered, I heard her voice. Claire, broken, breathless, crying. She didn't say hello. She just whispered, "Are you doing this to me?" I said nothing. I let her sob, her voice cracking through the line, her guilt spilling like poison. Then, in a calm whisper, I said the only thing that mattered. I told you. Everything you touch turns to ash. And then I hung up. After that, things escalated. Fast. Julian moved out. Rumor was he'd been drinking too much, growing paranoid, convinced someone was following him. Claire, meanwhile, had a public breakdown at one of their parties, accusing guests of laughing at her, claiming her phone was being watched. They said she was unwell. She checked into a clinic a week later. The city moved on. People forgot. But I didn't. I attended a charity gala months after, alone, in a simple black dress. Across the room, I saw Julian for the first time since the wedding. He looked thinner, paler, his charm stripped bare. Our eyes met, and for the first time, he looked away. That's when I knew I'd won. Not because he suffered, but because I didn't need him to anymore. But I wasn't finished. There was one last piece left. Closure on my terms. I arranged to meet him, pretending to be a journalist writing about postmarital scandals. He agreed, eager to rewrite his own narrative. We met at a quiet cafe, late afternoon light spilling through the windows. He looked worn out, his arrogance replaced by something hollow. When he realized it was me sitting across from him, his face went white. I smiled. Slow. Cold. He stammered. "What do you want from me?" I leaned forward and whispered, "Nothing, I already have everything I need." And then I placed a small velvet box on the table. Inside, 2 gold wedding bands. Ours. But they weren't alone. Next to them lay a silver flash drive. He hesitated, then reached for it. "Don't," I said quietly. "You don't want to know how deep the rabbit hole goes." He froze, realizing that for the first time, he wasn't in control. Then I stood up, left a few bills on the table, and walked away. Behind me, I heard him open the box, and the sound of his breath catching. He'd see the photos. The recordings. The documents that would make sure he'd never work in law again. All tied to his private indiscretions. All traceable. By the time the sun set that night, Julian's career was over. And for the first time since that cursed wedding, I slept without nightmares. Because vengeance isn't about destroying someone else. It's about rebuilding yourself from their ruins, brick by brick, until your silence becomes their punishment. And in that silence, I finally heard peace. Time didn't heal anything. It just made me better at hiding the scars. And in a world obsessed with image, that's the sharpest weapon of all. After Julian's reputation collapsed and Claire disappeared into recovery, people started rewriting the story for me. The betrayed bride. The woman who survived a scandal with elegance. They made me a myth, and I didn't correct them. I started small, lunches, charity boards, quiet interviews where I let a single tear fall at the perfect moment. I never accused anyone directly. I didn't need to. All I said was, sometimes love blinds you to what's right in front of you. The silence that followed always did the work for me. Soon the same voices that once whispered about my humiliation began praising my strength. They called me resilient. They called me grace under fire. They never realized they were building my throne. By the end of that year, I had sponsors asking me to speak at events about female empowerment. I smiled through it, every word carefully chosen. Behind every speech, every handshake, I could feel Julian's world shrinking. He couldn't show his face without seeing mine on a billboard or a magazine spread. His punishment wasn't prison, it was watching me turn our wreckage into a brand. And Claire? She tried to reach out once, from whatever quiet place she was hiding. I sent her a note back. Only 5 words. Thank you for setting me free. That was the truth. Without their betrayal, I would have stayed small, safe, waiting for someone else to define me. Now I was untouchable. Not because I destroyed them, but because I'd rebuilt myself so perfectly that their names no longer mattered. One night, at a gala in the same hall where my wedding reception should have been, I saw a new couple dancing. The lights reflected in the champagne glasses, the music soft and hopeful. Someone asked me if I ever thought I'd marry again. I just smiled and said, why would I, when I already own the story? The camera flashes caught that smile, calm, unreadable, dangerous. And that was how I knew I'd finally won. Because real revenge isn't ruin, it's reputation. It's walking into every room where they once pitied you, and watching them stand to greet you like royalty. People love a good ending. They want the villain punished, the heroine forgiven, the world set right again. But real life doesn't end that neatly. It fades slowly, quietly, like perfume after the party's over. Months passed. The headlines cooled. The whispers shifted to someone else's scandal. And for the first time, I woke up without thinking of them. Not because I'd forgiven, because I'd outgrown the need to remember. I used to think revenge was freedom, that if I made them hurt the way I had, the ache inside me would finally stop. But revenge is just another chain, polished, heavy, beautiful. It keeps you tied to the very people you swore to forget. So I stopped carrying their names like wounds. I stopped checking the mirror for ghosts. I built a new life out of the quiet things. Coffee in the morning, rain on the windows. My own laughter returning after so long I almost didn't recognize it. One evening I walked along the pier where Julian once proposed. The water was calm, the air still. I dropped my wedding ring into the sea, not as a symbol, not as revenge, just as release. It sank without a sound, and somehow, that silence felt like forgiveness. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about them. It's about deciding their story ends where yours truly begins. People still ask if I'd change anything. I wouldn't. Because sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is the only thing strong enough to turn you into who you were meant to be. I don't see myself as the woman who was betrayed anymore. I'm the woman who survived it, then sculpted something beautiful from the wreckage. And if anyone ever asks what became of the sister, the husband, the girl I used to be, I just smile and say, they're all gone. Only I remained. The camera would fade on her face there. No tears, no rage, just peace sharp enough to draw blood.